Okay, welcome back everybody. So, Soren channel here. We're going to go through the 737 cold and dark startup for the PMDG and GX. And I just want, just a quick disclaimer. This is my startup procedure. There is an official one that PMDG uses, but this is the one that I follow. So, let's just jump right in. So the first thing is we're going to go down to our FMC. Now I have the state loaded where I'm cold and dark, but I do have my FMC turned on. If for some reason this is off, all you got to do is press and hold for about 3 seconds onto the menu key on the FMC, and that will let it come to life. That's without having any power to the aircraft. So it's kind of like a quick cheat to get the thing up and running, just in case you run into that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to connect our ground power. So we're going to go to FS Actions, Ground Services, and request ground power. And while that's connecting, we'll head up to the overhead, and we will eventually see the light illuminate. There it is. It says ground power is available. So the next step is to turn the battery on, which is to close off this guard on the switch, which will automatically push the switch down to the on position and keep it there. And before our battery runs out of juice, we'll go ahead and connect the ground power, which will get power to the aircraft. Now, typically speaking, you're going to turn on your anti-collision light once you have power to the aircraft, just to let anybody around us know that the aircraft is powered up. Next thing would be to set your parking brake. One thing to keep in mind with the parking brake, so you can click it on by just clicking on the parking brake lever. But in order to turn off your parking brake, you're going to want to press and hold onto your regular brake key. Now, whatever that is assigned to, it might be assigned to one of your keyboard entries. It may be assigned to and bound to a button on your joystick. Whatever it is, you press and hold it, and that will release the parking brakes, which is basically, in the real world, in order to release the parking brakes, you actually need to press on the toe brakes on the pedals in order to release it. So we'll set that. And then we'll head over to the overhead and switch on our IRSs to nav. First, it's going to get power, and then it's going to go into the align mode, which is going to align the IRSs. And now we've got to tell the aircraft where we are, right? So the next step would be go back to your FMC and click on FMC. That's going to bring us to our ident page. It's going to tell you what current nav data is loaded into the system. If the current AirRack is not loaded in, or if you don't have a subscription to Navigraph, you're going to get a message here that says nav data is out of date. Now, it's okay to do that. The only problem is you're not going to be able to use real-world charts, because some of those charts may be out of date. So I highly recommend getting a subscription to Navigraph and updating both your SIM and PMDG to the most recent AirRack cycle. So now it's telling me I need to enter my IRS position. So in order to do that, I'm going to click on the soft key here next to pause init, which is position initialization. We'll clear the scratch pad out, clear the message, and we're going to put our reference airport. So for this particular flight, we're doing Boston to Miami. So we're going to type in Kilo Bravo Oscar Sierra, put that into our reference airport, and then we're actually going to use the last known position in the FMC that the GPS has picked up, which is this top line here. So in order to load this in to the scratch pad, you're just going to click on the soft key next to it. You'll see that puts into the scratch pad what your current coordinates are, and then you're just going to set that into the IRS position by hitting the soft key next to set IRS position. That will remove that, and now the FMC knows where you are in the world. Now, before we get into our route, we're going to go to the tablet, to the electronic flight bag. So you click on electronic flight bag, and since I'm using SimBrief, which is also part of my Navigraph subscription, I'm just going to go ahead and request the flight itself from SimBrief, and that's now loaded into the electronic flight bag. Now you can click on this button here. It's going to give you the operational flight plan. It's going to give you all the information you need. You can scroll through, see what your fuel levels should be, your route, all that stuff is going to be in here. And then we're just going to leave that alone. Nothing else to do there. So next step is to go back to the FMC, and now we're going to load our route into the FMC. So you click on route, and KBOS has already been placed into the scratch pad. That's because it knows that that's where we are, so we're going to load that right into the origin. Nothing else here matters as of right now because you're actually going to pull the data for the rest of this information directly from the flight plan request. So click on flight plan request, SimBrief route. Of course, you could download files and do it that way, but we're just going to do it from the SimBrief route here, which is preloaded now that we've loaded it into the electronic flight bag. So just click on that. And this is going to give you all the information about the flight. Flight number, altitude, zero fuel weight, reserves, block fuel, distance, all that stuff is going to be in here. So we want to now set the payload and fuel levels to the appropriate settings so that we are aligned for this information. So just click on set payload and set fuel. You can clear the messages out. And now we're going to select our route. So click on select route and then click on request again. It's going to take about a minute or two for the FMC to pull the data from SimBrief. And once that does, you're going to see a little load button populate here at the bottom of the screen. Route uplink is ready. Just hit load. And now it's taking a moment to load all the data into the FMC. Once that's done, you're going to get an activate button. You can also save the route if you wanted to, but you don't have to. Hit activate, execute, and now we're all set here in our FMC as far as our route is concerned. If you go to the next page, you'll see the route in here, so you can see if there's any discontinuities or what have you. And while we're here, we might as well go ahead and add our departure and arrival information in. Now, you would only enter this in once you've been given the departure information, just in case it's any different. But in this particular case, we're going to assume that we've been assigned runway 22 right via the SOX 7 departure, and then a transition to the SOX waypoint, and then we'd be on to our route from there. And we're also going to do the same with our arrival, which again, I have one loaded into my flight plan, but ATC may give you a different arrival depending on certain circumstances. So we're just going to assume that we're going to use 08 right at Miami, and we're going to be doing the I think it's Bonfish or Binfish to arrival from the HOAG or HOG transition. So we go to departures and arrivals. We're going to click on our home airport departures. I'm going to select our runway, which is going to be 22 right. And then we're going to find our SID, which is SOX 7. And there's no transitions that are listed, but if there were any transitions that would apply to get you onto your en route phase, that you would also select and then hit execute. And then we'll do the same thing with our arrival into Miami. So we'll go back to departures arrival, click on Miami arrivals, And like we said, we're going to assume we're getting ILS 08 right approach, so we'll click on that. We're doing the bunfish or binfish 2, so we'll click on that. And we're doing the Hogue transition, we'll click on that. And now we've loaded our approach, our star, and the transition from our en route phase to our star, which is right here. Hit execute again. Now, I'm going to go to my legs page right now, and I'm going to see if there are any route incontinuities, or discontinuities, sorry. So we're just going to go through all the pages, just see if there's any discontinuities that are listed in here. And the only thing I see here, which isn't a big deal, but if you're not flying with ATC, this vector waypoint, in fact, I can kind of show you here on the map. So let's do this. So I'm going to set up my map where I've got some view and go to plan, and we're going to go step by step. So from Madonna, we hit step to Tupac, step again, and you can see if I zoom out a little bit here, once we get to Tupac, it's going to tell us to go on an indefinite heading until basically we're assigned some sort of course direction to get us onto our ILS. But in this case, you know, we're not going to be flying with any ATC today, so we can actually just get rid of that vector. So in order to do that, we're going to click on the next line item, which is Copra. And that's going to load that into the scratch pad. And then we're just going to replace that vector waypoint with Copra and then hit execute. And now you can see as we reach Tupac, it will actually put us on a course that will get us right onto our ILS approach. So now there's no real discontinuities. Otherwise, if you were to just fly that vector, it will just fly forever. Okay, want to make sure I'm not going out of order here, so I'm just going to take a look at my checklist. And we are good. So, next thing is back into the FMC. We're going to go to init ref. Okay. Now this is where we're also going to pull all the data for our performance from SimLink or from SimBrief. So we're going to click on perf init request. It's going to again take another moment or two for it to load in to the FMC, and then once it does, you're going to see again you're going to see a little load button that populates here. There it is. Perf init uplink is ready. Go ahead and hit load and execute. Then we'll go to our N1 limit. Now this is where you could derate the takeoff or the climb settings. This is really based on, you know, real world airlines will utilize this to save on fuel and increase performance, but you don't have to do anything here. You can just leave it at full takeoff or climb thrust and then just move to, and don't worry about this. This is just saying that we're not really going to have a descent path after Tupac, so we might have to utilize some sort of manual descent to make sure we get down to an appropriate approach altitude. So you just clear anything that comes up like that. And then we'll head over to our takeoff reference. Most of the time you're going to do a flaps 5 takeoff unless you have some sort of different configuration. So we'll do flaps 5, load that in. And then we need to figure out what our trim is, so we need to load our center of gravity. So in order to do that, it's actually already preloaded from our perf init page. So if you just click on the soft key next to center of gravity, it's going to actually load from that perf init, and then just click it again, it's going to load that in. So now we can see our trim. So we can set our trim to about 5.22. So in order to do that, we'll go over here, and we'll just move this down until we get to roughly 5.22. Which is going to be about a quarter of the way between 5 and 6. So there we're at 5 now, and we'll call that about right there, 5.22. Then we'll go right back into our FMC, and this is very important. You want to make sure that your V-speeds are loaded in. Those V-speeds will not populate until you've done all the other steps, but once they're in there, all you're going to do is click the soft keys next to them, and now they are loaded in. So we are done now with the route, with the performance initialization info and also with our takeoff reference. So we're done with the FMC for a little bit. And we set our trim as well. So now we're going to go to our overhead, and we're going to start configuring the aircraft for pushback and start. So, and one other step, actually, if you go back to performance initialization. So today we're going to be flying at flight level 320. Now, your trip/cruise altitude will kind of default to whatever is possible to be done by the aircraft based on the information you've given it. But since we're going to be flying at 320, you want to type that in, 320, and load that in. That way, and hit execute. That way now you're telling the aircraft, okay, yeah, we could go up to flight level 360, but we're actually going to level off at flight level 320. And we'll just go back to our takeoff ref page, which is, I kind of call this ground zero. Like once you get here, you're pretty much done with the FMC until the only other thing I'm going to need to do is to remove the chocks and disconnect power. Again, you can just get rid of any messages that pop up there unless it's important ones. So up to the overhead. So I kind of go top to bottom, left to right. We'll start with this whole section here we don't need to worry about other than the yaw damper. We're going to want yaw damper to on. And we're going to need to fire up the APU. So the first thing we're going to do is use the left aft fuel pump. Click that to on. Now we are loading, our fuel is being pumped into, the fuel pumps are pumping fuel. And now we're going to tell the aircraft to turn on the APU. So we're going to click on, and then we'll click on start. And that's going to start revving up our APU. And once the APU has started and settled down, there's going to be a little blue light that appears right here, and it's going to say that the APU bus is ready, which means we can transfer power from the ground power unit to our APU. We're all set with all of our power up here, so until we transfer over to the APU, we're just going to go through with the rest of everything here. Emergency lights as desired. Fasten seatbelt lights as desired. Window heat. All four of those need to be on. We'll leave our engine pumps and our electrical pumps, hydraulic pumps alone for now. Both recirc fans should be in the auto position. Left pack to auto. Isolation valve to auto. Right pack off. APU bleed on, and then the generator bleeds will leave on as well. And we'll set our cruising altitude to flight level 320. And real quick, I'm going to take a look at the chart for Miami and see what our field altitude is. I think we're pretty close to sea level in Miami, if I'm not mistaken. So right there on the water. If it ever comes up for me. Navigraph charts are being a little slow at the moment, so I'm actually going to go to airnav.com, type in Miami, and field altitude is 9.3 feet. So we'll actually leave our landing altitude at 0 feet. You round that off to the nearest 50 feet because this will only go in 50-foot increments. So round that off to the nearest 50 feet. The rest of your lights will be as desired. Your position light will remain in the steady phase until you get to an active runway and have been given clearance to enter that runway. And then you will leave it in strobe and steady for the remainder of the flight until you get onto the ground and off of the active runway. Then you'll go back to steady. This is just telling other aircraft that you are cleared to be airborne and are actively moving in the airspace. Logo light, wing light, wheel light, that's all as desired. Now our APU is fired up. We have the APU gen off bus. So we're going to switch our power and transfer it from the ground power unit over to the APU by clicking the two middle buttons down. And now our power is completely running off of the APU generator. And that is pretty much it for the overhead. And now we're pretty much ready for pushback. So for me, I use toolbar pushback. I know Logan Airport in Boston pretty well, so we're going to do a pre-planned pushback. I am at gate Alpha 22, I believe. I believe it's Alpha 22. But basically, I know that we're going to be we're going to be facing to the right with our nose. So we're going to line ourselves up here for the taxiway. And that is set. So now we can go ahead and call for push and start. Before we do that, actually I forgot about this step. Go to your main control panel. You're going to turn your flight director on, both of them. And you're going to set your speed to, actually it's going to be V2 speed plus 20. So in this case it's going to be 175. That's going to get us onto a climb thrust scenario once we've taken off. And we're going to arm our auto throttle. And then you'd put in whatever altitude you're assigned to fly to. In this case, we're just going to put in our max altitude because we're not flying with ATC today. And we'll clear our master caution. Go down to the FMC, and we're going to go to Menu, FS Actions, and Ground Services, and we can go ahead and remove our wheel chocks. That will automatically disconnect your ground power, and now the wheel chocks are off as well, so we are in a scenario where we can go ahead and push back from the gate. So in order to do that, we're just going to go ahead and request our pushback. So right now they're positioning the tug to line up with the aircraft to get it ready for push. And the first thing we're going to do is change our ignition to right side. And then we're going to change this to ground, but we're going to wait until we've been given clearance to go ahead and push and start. And also before we do all of this, we've got to turn on all of our fuel pumps. Center fuel pumps will be based on whether or not you are using fuel in your center pumps. And then we'll turn on our electric hydraulic pumps as well. So those are both on. Oh, and one other thing. Make sure that your left pack is off and everything else is fine. Now we're good to start our engines. So they want us to release the parking brake, so you go ahead and do that. And then it's going to start pushing. Alright, so we've been given clearance to start our engines. So we're going to change our engine selector to ground. That's going to start whirring up the engine. You're going to start seeing your N2. Whoops, I just moved that my trim a little bit. That's okay. You're going to start seeing your N2 start to rise up. You wait until that gets to about 22% N2, and then you're going to move your fuel selector for engine 2 from cutoff to idle. So go ahead and do that. That's going to continue starting up that engine until it settles and gets to an idle speed. Now, one thing that you're going to see is once the engine has been started and we are at a normal speed, this selector knob here is going to automatically switch to off, and that will just indicate that we're good to start the other engine. So you can see we're pushing back here at Logan, and we're going to be lined up right here at spot 4, and that click noise you just heard is that selector just went to off. So now we're going to go to the left ignition switch, turn the engine 1 to ground. And again, we're going to look at our N2 figures. And we're going to wait till that gets to 22%. Once we get to 22%, we can go ahead and lift engine 1 from cutoff to idle. And now the same thing's going to happen for engine 1. So now we are on the taxiway and we are pushed back from the gate. We're waiting for our engine 1 to be fully engaged, and then we can go ahead and configure the rest of the aircraft for taxi and takeoff. One thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to transfer the power again from the APU generator to the main engine generators, which are these outside knobs. And you're going to see this is going to click over to off. It just did that. So now we're good to transfer our power over to the regular generators. So these two outside knobs to on. So now we're transferred over to the main engine generators. Turn our probe heats on. And we will turn our left pack to auto, right pack to auto, APU bleed off, APU off, taxi light on, and we are configured for taxi. And then at this point, what you're going to want to do is set your flaps. So we'll set our flaps to 5 degrees. We will set our auto brakes to rejected takeoff mode, which basically means that if you are rolling down the runway and you have not reached your V1 speed yet, and you bring the throttle to idle, the aircraft will do everything in its power to stop as quickly as possible. So it's going to reject the takeoff. So that's why we do that. And then the only other thing here to do is we want our pressure to be at the local. So you just hit B, and that's going to bring you to the local pressure. Or you can use this knob here to change your inches of mercury to adjust your altimeter. And now we want to also turn on our TCAS. So down below where your transponder is, you can change that to TARA. And then up top, you just hit on the traffic button here. And now TCAS is active. So we are all configured. Overhead looks good. No bells and whistles on here. No displays that are telling me that we're in a bad situation. Get rid of our pushback menu. Go back down here, and we can release our parking brake, and we are ready for taxi. So you just go ahead and give it some power and start taxiing to the runway. Of course, that's when you would tell ATC, hey, I've pushed back, I'm started up, and I'm ready to taxi to the active. Tell them what ATIS information you have, and go from there. So I'm not going to bother you with the boring taxi to the active runway, but that is your cold end start procedure for the NGX 737. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. I appreciate everybody taking a look at this video. Let me know how I did. Feel free to subscribe. And that's going to do it for this video. So I appreciate you all watching, and we'll see you next time.